Imagine standing in a government marriage office, dressed in the soft cream dress you chose after weeks of searching, a simple dress that made you feel both elegant and hopeful. The clerk has already laid out the papers, the pen is in your hand. You think you're about to sign the first page of the life you've dreamed of for 5 years, until, in front of everyone, the man you trusted reaches for another woman's hand instead of yours. What would you do? Cry, beg, or walk out and choose a different destiny? That question pulsed through Emma Carter's mind even before she realized she was asking it. She stood in the municipal hall, her heart beating in rhythm with the old ceiling fan above. The place smelled of paper, ink, and faint lilies, her lilies, the ones she had ordered from a little florist on Market Street because she believed that even a civil wedding deserved a touch of grace. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, trying to still the tremble in her fingers. Daniel was running late, as always. He'd promised to leave his phone in the car, to be present, but of course he had not. He had texted her an hour ago, "On my way. Don't worry." She had been telling herself for months not to worry. Daniel had a way of making her feel like she was too emotional, too needy, too concerned. Yet here she was, at the moment when everything was supposed to become official, with her heart racing and her mouth dry. She rehearsed in her head what she might say when they were finally husband and wife, how she would thank him for sticking by her, for supporting her through her career change, for believing in their future. Then the door opened. Daniel walked in looking like a man arriving at a board meeting instead of a wedding. Crisp navy suit, polished shoes, phone in one hand, his assistant Lydia right behind him carrying a file folder. Emma blinked at Lydia's presence. She had seen the young woman dozens of times at events and in Daniel's office, always perfectly dressed, always a little too eager to laugh at his jokes. Emma had even teased him once, "Your assistant looks at you like you're a movie star," and he had brushed it off with a laugh. He glanced at Emma, gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes, and set his phone down on the counter. Lydia hovered at his side like an invisible wall between them. The clerk cleared his throat, impatient. "Please sign here," he said, sliding the marriage papers across the counter. Emma reached for the pen, but Daniel didn't move closer. "Wait," he said suddenly. His voice was too calm, like a man about to deliver bad news at work. "Emma, I can't do this." She froze, pen in hand. "What?" "I've been thinking," he said, glancing at Lydia as though drawing courage from her. "I don't love you the way you deserve. Lydia and I, we're together. I'm sorry." The room tilted. The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the desk. She felt every pair of eyes in the hall turn toward her. Another couple signing their papers stopped mid-sentence. A clerk pretended to shuffle forms but was clearly listening. "I left everything for you," Emma whispered. "I believed in you." Daniel's eyes flickered. Shame, maybe, but also relief. He took Lydia's hand right there, as if the announcement were simply a line item on his agenda. "I'll take care of you financially," he offered, like she was a contract he'd outgrown. Emma's cheeks burned. Images flashed in her head. Late nights waiting for him to come home from business trips, weekends rearranged around his schedule, birthdays celebrated in his office because he couldn't leave a meeting. She realized she had built her life around a man who had been planning an exit strategy. The weight of humiliation and betrayal pressed down, but somewhere under it a harder, clearer voice rose up. Pride, self-respect, the part of her she had silenced for years. She straightened her back. "Keep your money," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You've already taken enough." A gasp rippled through the room. Daniel's expression hardened. "Don't make a scene," he murmured. But Emma was already turning away. She walked out of the office, her heels clicking sharply on the tile, leaving the lilies behind on the counter. The heavy doors swung closed behind her, cutting off the low murmur of shocked voices. Outside, the air hit her like cold water. She stepped down the marble steps, blinking at the bright noon sunlight. A small group of people waiting outside parted as she passed. Somewhere a car horn honked. Her pulse was a roar in her ears. She wanted to scream, but instead she just kept walking until she reached the edge of the sidewalk. She realized, absurdly, that she still had the veil pinned in her hair, fluttering in the breeze. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The back window lowered. Inside sat Alexander Lewis, the quiet, self-contained heir of the Lewis Group, a man she had met once at a charity gala years ago and never thought she would see again. Everyone in the city knew his name. the family fortune, the empire of hotels, the whispered stories of his broken engagement after his fiancée's tragic death. He was rumored to be impossible to impress, immune to drama, and yet now he was looking at her with something like concern. "Emma," he said, his voice low. "Are you all right?" For a heartbeat she couldn't speak. "Not really," she managed. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. "Come, you shouldn't stand here." She hesitated, but the sidewalk felt like quicksand beneath her feet. She opened the door and slid into the cool interior. The door closed softly, sealing her away from the noise outside. Inside the car, she finally let one tear slip down her cheek. Alexander handed her a silk handkerchief without comment. He didn't ask for details. His quiet felt like a bomb after the public humiliation. "You don't have to be polite," she said after a moment. "I was just left at the altar." "Well, at the marriage office. By a man who thinks I'm replaceable." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Then he's a fool." She gave a bitter laugh. "Maybe, but I guess I'm free now." The car moved through the city, past buildings where Daniel and she had once dreamed of owning an apartment, past the restaurant where they had their first date, past the park where he had proposed under a string of fairy lights. With every block, Emma felt something breaking loose inside her. Pain, yes, but also the heavy weight of compromise she had carried for years. "Freedom can feel like loss at first," Alexander said softly. "But it can also be a beginning." She turned to look at him. "A beginning of what?" "That depends on you," he said. "But you don't strike me as someone who stays broken for long." For the first time that day, Emma felt a small, trembling spark of hope. They drove in silence for a while. She noticed his hands on the steering wheel, steady, deliberate. Not like Daniel's restless tapping fingers. She noticed too that he didn't fill the air with empty platitudes. Instead, he simply let her sit, breathe, and come back to herself. "I don't even know where to go," she admitted. "I gave up my apartment when we planned the move to his place. Everything I own is in storage. You can stay at one of our guest properties," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "No strings. Just until you figure things out." She blinked. "Why would you do that?" He glanced at her. "Because I've been where you are. Not exactly the same, but close enough to know what it feels like when the world you built collapses in public." She thought of the news stories about his fiancée, the photographs of him at the funeral, the speculation about whether he'd ever love again. She had pitied him then, from afar. Now she felt a thread of understanding connect them, two people blindsided by loss. "Thank you," she whispered. The car slowed in front of a modern apartment building with floor-to-ceiling windows. "Here," he said. "You'll be safe." Emma stepped out, still clutching the handkerchief. She felt dazed, like she had stepped out of one life and into another without warning. Alexander handed her a keycard. "Take a day to rest," he said. "Then, if you're ready, come see me at the Lewis Group offices. I think you have more strength than you realize." She nodded. "I don't know what comes next." "That's the best part," he said quietly. "You get to decide." As the car pulled away, Emma stood on the sidewalk, the city humming around her. She looked up at the glass tower rising above, then down at the keycard in her hand. Hours ago she had been preparing to sign her name onto a life with Daniel. Now she was standing at the threshold of something unknown, painful, yes, but also wide open. She walked inside, feeling the marble floor cool under her feet, the echo of her footsteps in the high-ceilinged lobby. The receptionist smiled and handed her an envelope. Alexander had already arranged everything. Upstairs, in the quiet of the apartment, she unpinned the veil from her hair and set it gently on the bed. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, eyes red but still bright, shoulders squared. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this was not the end. This was the turning point. She didn't know yet what she would become, only that she would not be the woman who begged for someone else's love. She would not be the headline, jilted at the marriage office. She would build something new, even if she didn't yet know its shape. And as the sun set behind the city skyline, Emma Carter took her first deep breath as a free woman. What happens when the woman everyone pitied at the marriage office becomes the one everyone envies? When she stops being a victim of betrayal and becomes the architect of her own life? This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about transformation, and about how sometimes the person who shows up in your darkest hour is the one who was meant to be there all along. Emma Carter woke up the next morning in the high-rise apartment Alexander had lent her, the city glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows like a galaxy of possibilities. She had expected to feel hollow, but instead she felt strangely awake, as if the previous day had been a storm that swept away everything old. The cream dress was folded on a chair. The veil lay like a ghost across the bedspread. She stood barefoot, watching the sunrise paint the buildings gold, and whispered to herself, "This is the beginning." At first, she had no plan. She spent hours walking through the city, letting memories of Daniel pass through her like shadows, coffee dates, whispered promises, the night he had proposed under string lights. Each memory hurt, but each also felt smaller, like a painting she had outgrown. In the evenings she sat at the apartment's sleek kitchen island, sketching ideas in a notebook, not sure why she was doing it, campaign ideas, slogans, rebrands. Before Daniel, she had been a rising star in PR. She had buried that ambition to support his plans. Now the ideas were coming back, bright and insistent. Alexander didn't crowd her. He called once to check in and then let her breathe. A week after she moved in, she received an invitation, lunch at the Lewis Group headquarters. She almost didn't go, but something in his brief message, "You have more strength than you realize," pulled her there. The Lewis Group offices were everything Daniels had aspired to be but never reached, elegant without being cold, buzzing with quiet confidence. Alexander met her in the lobby, dressed simply in a gray suit. "I'm glad you came," he said, leading her into a glass-walled conference room with a view of the river. Over lunch he explained his vision. "Our company has grown, but our image is stuck in the past," he said. "We need to speak to a new generation. I've seen your work. I know what you can do." She stared at him. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a chance," he said. "Not charity. I want your mind, not your gratitude." For the first time in months, Emma felt the spark of professional excitement. She took a breath. "I'll do it," she said. The weeks that followed were intense. She arrived early, stayed late, poured herself into campaigns for the Lewis Group's hotels, sustainable ventures, and philanthropic projects. She found herself thriving under the pressure. Her presentations were crisp, her ideas resonated. She felt herself becoming visible again, not as someone's fiancé but as herself. Alexander watched quietly, offering support but never overshadowing her. Sometimes they had coffee together in his office, sunlight streaming over the stacks of proposals. He would ask about her ideas, really listen, challenge her gently. It felt like working with a partner rather than a boss. Outside the office, Emma rebuilt her personal life piece by piece. She rented a small art-filled apartment of her own rather than staying permanently in the Lewis property. She called her parents and apologized for being distant. She started jogging in the mornings, feeling her body get stronger. She still had moments of sadness, memories of Daniel creeping in at odd times, but she no longer felt defined by them. 6 months after the day at the marriage office, the Lewis Group held a major product launch for a new eco-luxury hotel line. Emma had led the entire branding campaign. The event drew media, influencers, and business leaders. She wore a tailored black dress that made her feel like armor and arrived early to oversee the final touches. That was when she saw Daniel. He was standing near the bar, looking slightly out of place among the polished crowd. Lydia was on his arm, but she seemed distracted, her smile brittle. Daniel's gaze found Emma, and his expression shifted, surprise, then something like longing. He approached her after the presentation. "Emma," he said, his voice low. "You look incredible. I've made mistakes." She looked at him, and for the first time she felt no ache, only clarity. "Yes," she said simply. "You did. I thought I knew what I wanted," he went on. "But I see now, we had something real. Maybe we could." "No," she interrupted gently. "You chose your path. I chose mine. Goodbye, Daniel." His mouth opened as if to argue, but she had already turned away. Across the room, Alexander was waiting by the elevator, having seen the exchange but not intruding. She walked toward him, her steps steady, and for the first time it felt like she was walking out of the past instead of running from it. That evening, after the event, Alexander invited her to dinner. They sat at a quiet corner table in a restaurant overlooking the river. Candlelight flickered between them. "I saw him talking to you," Alexander said softly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said. "Really? I thought I'd feel angry, or sad, but I just felt, done. He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. Closure, he said. She smiled faintly. Something like that. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then Alexander set down his fork. There's something I should tell you, he said. About me. He told her about his fiancée, about the accident that had taken her life, about the years of shutting himself off from people. He told her about the fear of caring again, the walls he had built. His voice was calm, but his hands were tight around his glass. Emma listened, understanding the weight of trust he was giving her. When he finished, she reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. I'm still healing too, she said. I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious. I'm not asking for promises, he said. I'm just saying I'd like to walk beside you, however long it takes. For Emma, it was enough. More than enough. In the months that followed, their partnership deepened. They worked side by side on campaigns, then on a foundation supporting women rebuilding their lives after public betrayals, spouses, business partners, corporations. Emma became the face of resilience, invited to panels, featured in magazines. Not as the woman left at the marriage office, but as Emma Carter, strategist and philanthropist. At the foundation's first gala, a year to the day after her almost wedding, Alexander raised his glass to her. To new beginnings, he said. Emma smiled, a smile that reached her eyes. To choosing yourself, she added. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, but Emma no longer felt like a headline. She felt like a whole person. Later, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Alexander joined her. You've come a long way, he said. We both have, she replied. He looked at her for a long moment. You're remarkable, you know. She felt warmth rise in her chest, not the desperate heat of needing someone's approval, but the quiet glow of being seen. Thank you, she said. They stood together in the cool night air, the noise of the gala drifting out behind them, the future wide and open before them. Emma thought back to the girl in the cream dress at the marriage office, pen trembling in her hand. She could barely recognize her. That girl had been waiting for someone else to choose her. This woman chose herself, and in doing so, had found a partner who met her as an equal. She took a deep breath, feeling the city hum beneath her, and smiled. The story that had begun with humiliation had led her here, to this balcony, to this moment of quiet power. She didn't know exactly what came next, but she knew one thing, she would never again shrink herself for someone else's comfort. Inside, the music swelled. Alexander held out his hand. She took it, and together they walked back into the light. And somewhere deep inside, Emma whispered to that younger self, you made it.